startups begin in communities across the country.
Why does Silicon Valley get so much credit? My name is Nick Castor.
And I'm Kaitlyn Clays. We're interviewing the people building startup communities across America.
But in the areas no one is talking about, the middle.
This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast by mug.news. This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast. Ecosystem building is the subset of economic development that focuses on fostering entrepreneurial activity within a community. Today's guest is Melissa Grizzle, who is based in St. Louis, Missouri. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on to the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to about our conversation this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's crack in. So how did you first become involved in your startup community?
So right now I'm the Director of Entrepreneur Development with I-10. And so I-10 itself has been in the ecosystem for a little over 13 years here in St. Louis. I'm working predominantly with tech startups. But me personally, I got my start in the startup community back in 2003 with a seed fund that is now part of BioSTL called BioGenerator. So they were launching that on the life science side. So the life science area of startups has about a 20-year head start on the tech, on the more software app side that I-10 was so instrumental in launching in 2008. So yeah, so I was on the life science side of the startup community, and also went with a startup that was BioGenerator's first investment, and was with them for a number of years, and grew a team and shrunk a team, and the whole roller coaster of a startup. And then came over to I-10 in 2014. So been here working with, like I said, predominantly tech startups, but there's technology and everything now. In fact, we're very much focused on innovation-led. So you could be, as long as you're doing something innovative, it doesn't have to necessarily be building an app or a SaaS product or whatever. So yeah, and then about a year ago, we became a part of Lindenwood University. So we had been a standalone nonprofit and for a number of years, and then now we're part of an academic institution, which gives us even more ways to make impact in the region. So yeah, I've been kind of both on the ESO side and in between on a startup, which I think is really important for those of us that are on the entrepreneur support organization side to really know what it feels like to ride that roller coaster of a startup and know what our founders are facing, and it helps us design our programs better and have empathy for that process and just be smarter, I think, about the way we provide our services. But yeah, so that's the Cliff Notes version of my history. So almost 20 years.
Wow. And you're definitely like right on with knowing your audience, understanding and having that empathy for startups. I think that that's so important and really cool that you touched on that. So are you a St. Louis native?
So no, I'm not. In fact, here in St. Louis, the running joke is, people ask you where you went to high school. It's the first thing. So it's a very, it feels like a small town, big city. And I'm not originally from here, though I've been here for a quarter of a century now, which is scary to think how fast that's gone, actually. But I went to the University of Missouri in Columbia, and then came here, but grew up in Murray, Kentucky, in a small town in Kentucky, and around academics. My parents are both were at the universities while I was growing up. So it's exciting to be back in that university environment now, actually using my master's degree in higher education administration, which I hadn't because I came to St. Louis and actually never planned to work for a large corporation, but started working at Monsanto, which is now a part of Bayer, been bought by Bayer. But Monsanto was a huge impact on the St. Louis region, and a very innovative company, especially in the mid-90s when we first launched a lot of the plant biotech products. So to be a part of that on the corporate side was really exciting, especially right out of school. And that's how I kind of found myself into the startup side of life sciences and made that path over to the dark. I don't know which one's the dark side. I guess it's what you talk to, but over to the tech side.
Different teams, different perspectives and everything.
And different paths to commercialization, which took me a little while. I remember the first time I was in an investor prep a pitch practice sort of setting. And this founder was his ask for, for investment was like $250,000. I was like, what is he going to do with $250,000? Because I had been so used to the life science side where that doesn't even buy the equipment you need, let alone the scientist to do something with it. So you can bootstrap a lot more on the tech side and get a little bit further with less. You don't have to jump right into the larger dollar amounts that we were used to over in the scientific side of things. So it's been interesting, to see all the different things that are happening in that broad innovation, in the commonalities and the differences. So yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine that dollar sign difference being like crazy different sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. And I think, it's gotten a little bit better. I think that people have realized that you can iterate on the life science side if you can, give people little bits they don't need an entire lab. They don't need their own equipment. They can get by with shared equipment and a smaller lab, so there's iterative ways, which I think is great, because that's one of the things here at I-10 that we really are like trying to get founders to figure out. How can you do things very iteratively and very small while you're figuring out exactly the best market? So many founders make a lot of assumptions really fast and start off down a path that ends up being a little bit, the struggle to get traction because they haven't really done the homework at the front end. So.
So you had mentioned, we talked about this off screen, and then you've mentioned it a couple times here, working in higher education, working with I-10. Would you mind explaining a little bit more about your role and how you're helping educate students?
Sure. So, like I said, I-10 has been around working with community-based startups and founders for 13 years. We probably, both in building the ecosystem that supports them and really focusing on what they need, really putting the entrepreneur first. And that has really driven a lot of the things that we've built internally or looked for or tried to create, for our entrepreneurs. And so we've, so probably about 1,500 startups over that period of time, a lot of really early stage folks. So like idea stage through to probably the first outside funding. But, and so then when we became a part of Lindenwood last May, and we all can kind of know what last May of 2020 felt like in the world. In fact, it speaks to how dedicated I think Lindenwood is to growing entrepreneurship for their students and really doing some really cool disruptive things for them to say, sure, in the middle of a global pandemic, when we're dealing with all sorts of things in higher ed and unprecedented times, we got sick of that phrase, but that's what they were. They said, no, we see something we really think we can create a win-win situation. And they're like, come on in. And it may be a little bit of a learning process, especially since we don't have a typical school year to plug you into, but we're going to figure this out. And we know we're going to do cool things for our students and for the region. So, they saw that our history brought a lot to the table for the university, but also, just the network that, we've built in the broader region. So, Lindenwood's out in the western part of the suburbs in St. Charles County, across the Missouri River, which is the western side of the St. Louis region. They also have a presence, a small campus in downtown St. Louis. That's where I am today, a couple of blocks from the Arch. So, we can help. And then they have some other campuses throughout the metro area. And so I really think that we're helping them, really celebrate all those campuses and all those areas of the region to make an impact. So not just your traditional boots on the, like some ground traditional age college students in the main campus in St. Charles, but other parts of the region and just being a part of regional initiatives. But it's been an interesting year. I mean, we just had the first day of school on this year, and students are back in person. And if there was, anybody else in this room with me today, I would have a mask on. We're doing our best to keep people safe, but together. And that was one of the struggles this past year. But I'm really excited about one of the things Lindenwood really saw is, like I said, that we bring a network, but they really understood that we need to keep a presence in the community, to keep serving community entrepreneurs, because that's part of the value proposition for students, is that direct connection to that broader community. Because, entrepreneurship, while you can talk about it and teach it in a classroom, it's really something that you learn by doing it, and you learn by connecting with others that are doing it. And so that is and they get that, and they want to do, provide that for their students. So you come to Lindenwood and you can get plugged into the 100 plus startups that, I-10 is currently working with in the community. You can get plugged into this ecosystem map behind me that has 90 plus organizations that are helping people in the region. And so that's really exciting to see how we can make even more impact inside the academic arena this year, given, hopefully, fingers crossed, Delta variant on the get out of here under control, that we can, do some more things that we weren't able to do. But that said, all of our programming, even prior to COVID, is designed to be virtual. And we use curriculum that's, fully designed to be virtual and delivered virtually. So that, we can still make happen. In fact, we launched new programs during the pandemic to much success because people were looking for things they could do from their basements.
A massive shout out and thank yous to all of our professors and education givers. Truly, I have a lot of my family actually works in the education system, and they have expressed all of the different types of curriculum they need to provide, which is 3, and it's provided for in-person, completely online, and hybrid. So a massive shout out and thank you to all professors too. So I'm sure,
and not just with we're all dealing with students and with ourselves who are just trying to keep it together from a holistic person. Take care of ourselves, take care of our mental health, and all the other things that allow us to learn and allow us to move our businesses forward or move our education forward. So it's a lot, and that's one of the things that I definitely hope we can get back to being in person, but we try in the interim and even for even going forward after the pandemic to create a virtual community because that's so important for a lot of things. It's definitely important for entrepreneurs. That can be a very lonely journey. And if you're trying to, deal with your family and a pandemic and your startup, and sometimes, your startup isn't your full-time job. So you've got that and you're doing things, your startup is your side gig, and you're feeling like, anytime you're in the downs of those roller coasters, it's like, okay, is it me? Is it something, and any kind of, I think, support that we can provide, connecting people to understand, it's like this for everybody and it's not you, and this stuff is hard, and we're there to help. Because I think that's another thing that we want to do more of. We've done some, but reaching out into the state and throughout the Midwest to smaller communities that may not have as many resources as we have physically here in St. Louis, and get those people connected into the networks, so they get to know people that are at, whether it's larger research, institutions, or just more people doing what they're doing. They may be the only person launching a tech startup in a small town in rural Missouri, but they know every Wednesday night they jump on Zoom and they connect with their I-10 cohort, and they feel that connection. And then, they may road trip, a couple times a year to be in person, but they can still have that community and still have those resources that can help them alongside the ones that are local. So it's an exciting and interesting time. And hopeful that we can get through this as we can actually be in the same room together.
Right. Well, and there's been so much transfer onto online. So entrepreneurs are known, if you need to pivot, you need to pivot. There's going to be ups and downs. But I think it's also very important that students are learning this. It is a truth. There are going to be things you do not expect. So they're very much learning on site of all of the types of just again, pivoting and learning a different side of things. And it's been touched on too that, for example, keynote speakers that you would not have been able to have, fly them in. I think, was it you? I think you brought it up in a conversation that we had outside of this, that it's again.
Well, it's been interesting. I mean, we've all, outside of this space, we all got to have celebrities in our living rooms and see celebrities' living rooms. And you get that intimacy that you never thought you were going to see. I don't know, Beyonce's basement or Brad Pitt's kitchen or whatever, that we got to be a part of that. And so, but yeah, to your point, I think it's definitely allowed, the producers and the people that are taking in the content to sort of have a much bigger buffet, which can be good, but it can also be overwhelming. I think we're seeing sometimes, entrepreneurs are like, I don't even know. There's so much noise. There's so many things. What should I take advantage of? What should I apply for? What should I sign up for? What should I watch? What podcast should I listen to? This one, of course, but what videos should I be watching? What books should I be buying? Who should I be talking? So it can get a little overwhelming. I think that's one of the things that we've also prided ourselves on, is that wayfinding, both like cutting through the noise of the global noise, but, getting people on the right path. I can never point the right direction. This map.
Yeah.
Getting people on the right path. What is important to me? How do I take advantage of stuff? This is a lot. But it does allow us to connect with thought leaders, maybe, that we wouldn't have had the budget to bring them in, but they're willing to, click launch meeting and spend some time with us, which is great. And, I think within the entrepreneurship community, even when you get what we would like to think of as, these big thought leaders that get a lot of, they have their names on books and, things like that. There's still, I think, I at least of the ones I've encountered and spent some time with have been the most generous with their time, whether it's Ash Moria, who we're using Lean Stack curriculum and loving that, but just the, being able to they really practice what they preach and listening to their customers. So having conversations with them, or, Arlen Hamilton, who's a venture capitalist that came and spoke here a few years ago in St. Louis, and just is so generous with her time and brilliance. And, she's such a disruptor of the venture capital world in a fabulous way. So, I think I just enjoy being a part of this broader community, not just the St. Louis community, where I think we really have a, give back attitude and are sort of, I think here in the Midwest, especially, I like to I pride myself, and I think we do a good job of sort of countering that reputation that can often get depicted in our culture about what a tech startup founder is like. It's the Silicon Valley bro game or whatever. And that's not my life. That's not my life. It's not the kind of entrepreneurs that I see, we work with a ton that are very social justice minded and in their business models, in their areas of focus, in the way they treat each other, and the cultures they're building with their companies. So, that I think is amazing. I like to, celebrate that. I'm glad to hear that, you guys are focusing on this part of the country that has traditionally been flyover, and acknowledging, how many amazing people there are doing amazing things, and working together. I think we've worked with folks in Indianapolis and Kansas City, of course, and Nashville and Des Moines. That I think we feel that camaraderie in supporting the Midwest, in Michigan, and just, what Detroit's doing. I went to, just hearing all of our best practices, and that's exciting. I think to sort of come together and share with other ecosystem builders about, and you're realizing too that your challenges, like, oh, you have a hard time getting data out of your entrepreneurs and collecting that and you have a hard time telling your stories. Oh, okay. I thought I was just the loser that couldn't get their act together and tell her story, and it's hopeful that, we can help each other do better, but it's also sort of like, okay, it's all right. I'm doing, doing my best, and I'm not the only one. And yeah, so it's been, I enjoy that about what I, the kind of people I get to wake up every day and walk in the world with in my work life, are, so many people complain about their jobs and the people and the things that, and yeah, everything has its challenges, but I'm like, I get to hang out with really creative, fun people. And that's why I was drawn to this. If you'd have told me in college that I was going to be a part of the tech startup community or even the business, community at all, I would have thought you were kind of crazy. But I found that even though I didn't really identify as an entrepreneur or risk taker, or I wanted to be, and I wanted to get better at that. And, you hang out with people like that, and it's somewhat contagious, and it's somewhat, an exciting place to get up every morning and go to work and be around that. So yeah. What was the question?
Well, a saying came up that just reminded me. The saying is it all works out in the end, and if it's not worked out, it's not the end. Yeah. And I feel like that definitely directly applies to kind of the points that you were touching on, and risk taking and trying to go for it. I completely agree with you. In college, I didn't really know what entrepreneurship was at all. I had no idea. And so,
I was a French minor and I still struggled to spell it sometimes. So it's a little, it's an intimidating word, and it comes loaded in. So, I was in a room of arts and humanities students last week who spoke at their freshman, welcome thing. And I, to talk about I-10 and how they could engage with us. And I had them, I said, raise your hand if you would consider yourself an entrepreneur, and or think that's maybe what you want to do. And out of 100 students in there, you'll get 10, maybe. That's a lot in arts and humanities even. And I said, well, okay, keep your hands up, and then how about those of you who think you're, would consider yourself creative? Well, you're in arts and humanities, so you get a lot of hands, and how many
really
people,
hope so. You'd hope.
What about, do you like to ponder, big questions and explore innovative solutions to problems, or you care about the world and the people in it, and you want to make a difference in a meaningful way through what through your art, and and they start to get that, okay, yeah, this entrepreneurship is not a career, it's a mindset, and it's something that is desperately needed no matter what your job is thinking things in a innovative, new, creative, being comfortable with the things that you need in that kind of mindset's going to serve you no matter what you decide to do. Mm-hmm. And it's going to serve the teams that you're on, that you think you're going to make better decisions. Any business is going to make better decisions if they've got a more diverse team. And that goes across all ways you can be diverse, from life experience to race, gender, socioeconomic status, and what you studied. Your brain, you need the different kinds of brains. So that's one thing that excites me a lot about being a part of the university, is being able to affect that across the university. Yes, my office is in the business school, and that's where we're technically housed, but the business school is very much, we have a great dean that has a lot of vision, and a great, administration at the university that's, understands this is not a business school thing. This is across all disciplines, and really looking for those opportunities to engage students studying all sorts of things. Lindenwood has a great fashion entrepreneurship program actually in arts and humanities. That's why I was over there talking to them, and music entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship can go on the end of any major.
It really can. And so you had mentioned gig work. I know so many people who have side gigs and they don't consider themselves entrepreneurs, which is fair, because if you don't think about the definition or, things like that. And I think about some arts people. There's a person that I've seen on the internet, and she paints walls. People ask her to do a mural on their home. Mm-hmm. And that's entrepreneurship. She, is an arts person. She just likes to paint. Some people saw her work and were like, can you do that on my wall? Just because mm-hmm. I wanted something artsy on my wall. That's entrepreneurship. She's providing a service. And so again, just going in, any major you had, any creative outlet that you have, you can be an entrepreneur. And again, mm-hmm. like you said, definitely a mindset completely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned different statuses and like economic in addition to minorities. How do you support diversity within your ecosystem?
Yeah, so that's definitely a lens we put on in all of our work and have for a number of years. Being involved very intentionally, there's an annual symposium called the Vision Symposium that happens every October here in St. Louis that very specifically targets underrepresented minority founders, women founders, others that may not, and does intentional outreach to those communities to make sure they know about these resources. So often, communities that have not been invested in and haven't had generational development of networks, and they may not even know half this map exists. And so really being intentional and going into those communities and not just saying, well, we had an event and they didn't come. Well, did you have it in a place that would be welcoming to them? Did you advertise it in a place that would be welcoming to them? So in just really being looking at not just diversity and inclusion, but equity, and because that looks different based on different people's starting points. And I think here in the St. Louis region, I think the entire globe can have heard of Ferguson and know that we had our systemic racism on a global shine a global light on it, and we're not unique. Unfortunately, a lot of communities are like ours, but we were sort of held up as identifying these problems that exist in many communities. And, we've moved forward from that with very specific, the Ferguson Commission came out of that and looked at all the systemic racism that is built into all of our systems. And really came up with all these different actionable things. And, we've started to make some progress in that area, and, had some really great people that, have put those into action. And so listening to those that are dealing with the systemic things firsthand and understanding that, I think, as somebody, obviously I can understand the female journey, but I walk in the world as a white woman. And so that makes me blind to certain challenges. And so making sure that I'm, as well as my intentions are, I need to create space and then listen, or be in space and listen, and not be like coming in on the white savior horse that I think sometimes we well-intentioned can be. So I think we've started to do that better as a community. I think, again, my perspective, I'm sure that there are definitely some struggles and frustrations that aren't as apparent to me. But I think we have really tried to, make sure that we are intentionally doing, outreach to all area. We've worked, whether it's working with the Veterans Business Center to make sure that our veteran population knows how to make that, get access to our resources, or but just a lot of different efforts with, in our rural population, as I mentioned earlier, that it can be challenging for them to get access to resources. And then really we're trying to focus on making our mentor group. We have a large mentor pool that needs to reflect our startups more, so about 40 to 50% of our founders are founders of color. And that's not where our percentages of mentors are. So trying to make some pathways into that, and not just sitting around and being lazy, like, oh, well, I don't think they exist. Like doing the work that and creating environments, like I said, for people who want to be a part of what you're working on. Because I think so often you see people, well, we told them about it. Yeah. Like they didn't come, that's on them. And that not even stopping to think like what barriers they're creating. So it's not an, you can't meet racist or sexist or policies or practices with neutral ones. You've got to be intentional in trying to fix things. So it's definitely a focus, something that we try to pay attention to and not just give lip service to. And I think, that's another way that I think we are helping. Lindenwood has done made some great steps in that direction too, recently, but are wanting to do better in that regard as well. So I think that's where we can also be a good partner with them.
I definitely appreciate the intentionality, and you bring up some great points of like not intending to be the white savior, making sure that you're not just throwing your hands in the air and saying, oh, well, we tried, but like actively going out into communities, making sure resources are known. I think that's very important that your community's working on that, and that it's definitely a note that many communities should just observe, take into consideration, and move forward with however your community will best respond to different outreach. Yeah. So then what is something, just to highlight St. Louis, what's something that someone would not know about your ecosystem? Say someone was coming into the city for the first time. What's something they wouldn't know?
I think that we have such a robust community, and we have so many different types of startup industries, and we have a huge presence of geospatial and both in the government side with NGA's headquarters here, and the training centers that are now at T-Rex, which is a incubator and co-working space just a couple of blocks from here that we've always been a part of. And, so geospatial is really growing here. We have our Geo Futures initiative. And so I think we have a large group of cyber efforts and training going on. And, we've always been strong in ag tech. The Danforth Plant Science Center, I think St. Louis has more plant science PhDs than, any city in the country. We have a lot happening in ag tech. And I think, we have just a really growing, vibrant ecosystem, but it's still navigable. We're not siloed. There's no wrong way to enter our ecosystem, even if, we're not the best fit for helping you do whatever you need to do, or we're not the only fit. We'll help you put together, like, you need to go to that. If you're a health tech company, come in, join I-10, take advantage of our Eureka program, which is the one I mentioned earlier. That we use the Lean Stack platform, and we've got some other I-10 resources that we sort of wrap around that, helping people really slow down in those earliest of stages and do that business model validation work. So maybe they're doing that, and they're also talking with Biogenerator, who was like, okay, get some traction by going through Eureka, then we'll talk to you possibly about getting some space. And, they have one of the areas of the small lab space that you can get fairly inexpensively to do some proof of concept work, or maybe then we'll talk to you maybe about seed fund. Then we'll connect you to, to Venture Cafe, which is a, great big networking. Hopefully we can all get back to 400 people on a Thursday gathering, or we'll then connect you to some of our amazing universities. And so I think we're really good at helping people get, once they find one of us, that we can say, oh, you also need to do this, 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 and this. So we're a large city that has a lot of resources, but we're not so big that, we aren't 1 or 2 degrees of separation from everything that a small business owner or a startup would need to help them through their journey. So
you had mentioned, you've been going back, and you'd also mentioned that it's not a tier system with like the steps. It's more of a web. And so the map behind you, for audio listeners, if you can't see, so it's a web of ecosystems. Do you want to explain a little bit more about the map behind you and how it's more of a graph?
Yeah, that's the galaxy version, what we call it. So it has, all of it's sort of organized around funding, in the green, and community resources and events in orange. And then in the middle is facilities, which is all the co-working spaces. Blue is all the tech training entities. So we've got the universities that are part of that, but also purple is entrepreneur education. So all of those, because, there's some people that could do both, like all of our accelerators are down the middle there above the I-10 logo because they give money and education. And, so we try to show the connectedness with this version. And you can download this version at i10connect.org. But also at our website is a geographic version of it. So all of these organizations on a map where you can see where in the region that they're located, and then click through to their websites and check out those. So while, we have our own programs and obviously want our early stage innovation startups to take advantage of those, we know it takes an ecosystem to grow a startup, and we want to make sure they know about all the other things that are going on, so they can, create the buffet of resources that they need for their, customize their journey. So we've got this both at the PDF downloadable. And then we also have a map that puts it on a path. So, this is great, but if you don't know where these are appropriate in the stage of your company, it can be kind of hard to go, does that make sense for me? Also downloadable is our pathway map, where it sort of puts a fraction of these, not all, on the life of a startup, sort of where some are more appropriate on the really early stage. And then obviously like the funding and things like that are a little bit later on the path.
Right. I love that. I'm also a visual learner in addition to, the audio. I love my audio, but I do like to see a picture and kind of just put those things together. So I think that that's really cool that you're able to do that for entrepreneurs, not getting all stuck in, looking at paragraphs. So I think having a visual, super important. So speaking of funding, so for people who are getting on their feet and are needing those funds, do you have any recommendations for interest-free loans, any other sort of funding opportunities they can get tapped into?
Sure. I think, my biggest pushback always when an entrepreneur tells me they need funding is like, well, what kind of traction do you have? Because I think sometimes one of the things we try to get them to do is sort of what we call right action, right time, which is one of the mindsets we go over in the Lean Tech curriculum. So you don't have an idea and then go look for funding, especially on the tech side. You're like, especially investors, like maybe grandma will give you some money. Like if you got, and maybe if you want to put your own money, like if you want, scrap things or keep it as a side gig or invest a little bit, then I think for us, we want to help them make sure, because we know funding is so precious, that they're putting it behind the right thing. So that's always my challenge too. Before I will suggest kind of where they should go, it's like, where are you? Have you validated that there's a market for your product or your service? And, and the evidence of that is not academic. You don't go just do some research, or you kind of go with your gut, or you're like, I would buy this, or I've talked to 10 of my friends and they would all buy this, or, I in my little bubble, everybody wants you to succeed. So they're pumping you up and getting you excited. You got to go out of the building and talk to actual potential customers. And if you can show me that there's that, then I can say, okay, people will be interested in being a part of this from a funding perspective. But show me that somebody wants it, and so that somebody can't just be your mom, So like, and so, but here in as far as like early stage, so we have actually a fairly, it's fairly active CDFIs here, for early stage companies. And, again, CDFI is not my forte. Not going to, but I can go, let's, I'll send you to Justine Peterson or Rise or some of the other, entities, because we talk and we connect and we can get people. But if, helping entrepreneurs figure out the best path to funding for them is another thing that again, pop culture would tell you, you start a tech company, you go raise venture capital. The percentage of companies that are actually funded by venture capital, very, very small. So that one of the greatest ways to fund your company is through revenue. So, prove there's a market and start selling your stuff. And then looky there, you have some money. So trying to help them figure out the role, the different funding entities can play. We've got some great accelerators that, can give you a little bit of that influx of cash and surround you with that support. But even them, they are looking for some traction. So that's where we can come in, is like getting them ready to get that first 50K, which is actually the name of a great program here in Southeast Missouri. They have the first 50K, or an arts grant, which is an equity-free grant which is, great. Or a number of our accelerators, whether it's Capital Innovators or Stadia, which is sport. So we've or Yield Lab, we've got them for ag tech, sport tech, general tech. We've got, energy ones. We've, a lot of ones that focus on founders of color and women. And so there's definitely these early stage opportunities, but it's not like I have a great idea, I need you to give me $1 million to make it happen. Like that fallacy is part of what we do on a daily basis, is like, let us just reset those expectations, and figure out the best journey, because it might be a fabulous idea. And if it is, we want to help you find the best way to move it forward, because then the investors will come. But it's that education that needs to go along. Because even when they do find money, they still need help in knowing the smartest way to spend it.
Right.
And so that is really, an important thing to consider. But, we've got great venture capital for those people that are, that's an appropriate path. So, maybe they get some traction with us, then they can apply to Capital Innovators or whatever, one of our accelerators. They go through that program, then, Cultivation Capital or, one of the other venture capital firms here in town, we'll take a meeting. Or we have a fairly active the St. Louis Archangels is a, active angel group that's been around it predates me in the ecosystem. So it's been around for over 20 years. So there's definitely capital here. But the other thing that comes with that we talking back to being intentional about creating the right networks. One of the things we really think is important is that you connect people long before there's any ask or anything is needed of either one of them. And so that's, the part of like being intentional, getting people in rooms just to connect, not to have any kind of transactional conversation, because, that once you've created that connection, then the transactional conversations down the road can be much more effective. And because, people are going to invest in people, not just great ideas. So we try to look for those opportunities as well. But funding is always going to be a challenge, and we're always looking for innovative ways, whether it's like, Kiva is another, they're in a global thing that they've just come to town working closely with WePower, which is an organization that has an accelerator for Black and Latinx founders. And so Kiva's, so that's a different innovative way of funding, so just helping people think through that is because it's not the same path for every founder, for sure. And I think that's one of the biggest fallacies, that people think it's like, I'm going to go raise, this is the path, and this is what I have to go after. And when they don't have success going after, then they're like, oh, it's me, or it's, but no, this is just not the right path that you need to be pursuing. So
right. Well, that definitely very much resonates with the you have the idea, go get the money. That's not always it. Sometimes like you said, you need to prove that it will succeed. You need to prove that it'll come. That's kind of what brings me to that is kind of voiceover. So I work in voiceover as well as doing the podcast. And that was something too, is like you have the technology, but prior to consuming the technology, it takes money, but you need to understand like who your audience is, what is your voice like, what kind of technology do you need to get, and then also understanding how is your technology going to help you, and kind of doing that risk and evaluation and everything. So that totally resonates. We haven't really had an answer like that before, where it's like, there might be some things and steps in the background that you need to do before you go ahead and ask for funding.
Well, and I think sometimes it's easy to say, oh, there's no money, or I can't get funding, or we're not funding enough people. And there can be definitely, that's true when you're looking at, there's definitely implicit bias in things, and people that don't have the networks are getting cut out of the conversations. And we as human beings are wired to trust people that look like us. So we have to break down all of that. Yes, that is real. But there's also the situation of not every company should be funded. It's not like you just have an idea, so you should get some money to try it out. Do the work at the front end. Let's figure out, as they say in Lean Startup, the problems worth solving. If you want to go do your thing that's like a passion project for you, great, go do that. But if there's not a market, it's understanding investors' head. Investors need to make money. That's what they're doing. That's their livelihood. So, they're not, you can go do whatever you want to do. I'm not saying don't go try for something you think is fabulous, but if there's not a market for it, if it's just for you and your family, then don't expect people to give you money to do that. You know what I mean? So that disconnects sometimes.
Right. So then do you have any news outlets, podcasts, blogs that you recommend people check out to learn more about the ecosystem or entrepreneurship in general within the St. Louis area?
Oh my gosh. We do, I'm sure. And I'm not a huge on the cutting edge of all the latest ones. And I think there's been new ones that have popped up for sure during COVID. But I know that, we've got, our business journals just launched Inno, which is here in St. Louis. It's been in a couple of other cities. So that's, that literally was just launched last month. So they're targeting the startup community. We've had other entities that tell stories about the startup community and sort of in our history. So EQ is a site that has historically done that. I also think currently the Greater St. Louis and STL Made, which is broader than entrepreneurship, STL Made is, because it's anything St. Louis, but they do a great job at telling stories. And part of that is the entrepreneurship storytelling. But Greater St. Louis is a large economic development organization that has a lot of components under it and is a good place to sort of get a look at the region. And, so geofutures, the geospatial sort of a part of that. And so, but I will admit, I am not the expert in podcasts and in the region, and because I feel like I'm talking. I know that that people, the ones that existed fairly heavily before COVID, and my podcast consumption was during my commute. So that's why I feel like I haven't been taking in my podcast, because I've been sitting in my basement for 400 and something days.
There's no commute.
It's only been like the last month that I'm like, oh, I can now. So I'm digging down into things and trying to figure out what do I need to listen to and hear stories and hear, to catch up on things. But yeah, there's a lot happening, and I think we're slowly getting better at telling our stories. And then, there's also a part of a grant that we're a part of with the city, with St. Louis Development Corporation, which is the business arm of the city, is establishing a consortium called Tech STL that is really going to serve that purpose too within the tech community, not just with startups, but with just tech workforce initiatives, data around tech, just trying to help if someone showed up and they were sort of in the tech space, if they're a corporation that just wants to understand the tech space in St. Louis and how to plug in. And again, they just hired their executive director 3 weeks ago. So that's in its really early formative stages. But I think we recognize that that greater regional efforts can really, I think, impact our ability to recover from the pandemic and create resilience in places that were identified that definitely need it. This EDA grant, where it's a sprint challenge grant. So that's, we're a part of it on the entrepreneur education side. So, helping people make that pivot to economic recovery through entrepreneurship. But yeah, lots of other regional efforts, partly due to the amount of the different federal dollars that are becoming available for governments and nonprofits to apply for. So I'm excited to see the next couple of years all the new initiatives and the new things happening because of those opportunities, that both CARES money and the more recent legislation that has poured a lot of dollars into recovery. And I'm glad to see that they acknowledge that entrepreneurship and building those mindsets and helping small business owners and all those things can be such a critical piece in us recovering from the impact, not just the impact of COVID, but what COVID revealed to us about our lack of resiliency and where our gaps are. So talk to me in a year or two. Hopefully there'll be a lot more.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that's a very beautiful perspective to take on it, is just like showing that resiliency. I don't know. That was just a very beautiful statement. Like, thank you for touching on that. That was awesome. Yeah. So then before we close out, I wanted to ask, do you have any final thoughts or advice for anyone that might be listening?
Well, I think don't let what might appear to be a complexity of an ecosystem or the jargon of an ecosystem or the word entrepreneur intimidate you from engaging or for reaching out for the resources you need to explore an idea or to launch a company, because you belong in the room and you belong in those communities, and we need people that are passionate about what they're doing and have new and exciting ideas from all different walks of life. And so I think just, at least I have found both in St. Louis and in other ecosystems, again, I don't think there's a wrong way to enter an ecosystem. So don't be afraid to say, well, I don't know if I should reach out because I'm not sure I-10 is what I need. Reach out. I will help you to, figure that out. And if somebody, you're working on something that isn't our sweet spot, then I can get you connected to somebody who can help you more, or at least layer on to the things that we can help you with. So, I just think sometimes people are just hesitant to jump in or to become a part of it, because it can be a little intimidating, whether you're showing up back when we could show up in a room with 400 people, you show up and you're like, oh, what am I supposed to, someone told me to come here and I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing. Right. Or, this is a lot, or when we say words that are, jargon can be very, can create barriers, to engagement, because people are like, well, I guess everybody else in this room knows what that means. I don't know what that means, and just know that that's not the case. So I think, having the courage to just say, no, I have this idea. I want to see if anyone else, is excited about it as I can be, I am, and I'm going to just jump in and be a part of this, be a part of this community. So yeah, no, it's been, like I said, it's an exciting time. It's a challenging time for all of us, but I feel very blessed that I get to, be surrounded by, energetic, passionate, creative people that care about their world and solving the problems in it. Yeah, it's not a bad gig. So, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And, I think if anybody that is thinking about exploring an idea, again, we're in St. Louis, but our Eureka program is open to anybody because it's 100% virtual and uses, like I said, the Lean Stack set of tools, plus all of our mentors and peer groups. We have applications open until Friday for our validation thing, but we also do these like twice a year, both the ideation, which is the Lean Canvas, and Traction Roadmap, which is a really cool tool that helps put some reality on do I have a market here, or what is it going to take to get one? And so those are tools you get access to just by joining I-10. And again, we're helping anyone that's doing something new and innovative, whether you're, a food truck or really, an organic nail product or a SaaS, software as a service product, or you're exploring drones for production. So anyway, lots of different things. We're all over the place. So excited, and we're at i10connect.org. Just go check out what we do. And again, we're helping anyone that wants to connect with us. They don't have to be in St. Louis, and we love Midwest entrepreneurs. We'll take people from the coast too. We actually had someone in Boston participate last spring and someone from Mexico. And so, we had people, participating from different places, which is really great, to add that diversity to the conversation.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much for everything you do for your community. And I really appreciate your time to come on the show and talk a little bit more about what you do.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Kaitlyn. It was great to start my day with such a fun conversation. And I will look forward to hearing this and putting this on my podcast list as I start commuting more and more. I'll gotta get this podcast and the other ones that you all put together. And as we get more involved with our students, I'll hopefully be able to send you some students for the students podcast as well.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That'd be fantastic. And, speaking that you've touched on students, we actually have another podcast, another YouTube-based show called Coffee Grinds, which is where we highlight student entrepreneurs. So that's kind of, I guess, a plug for our other show that we have as well. So thank you so much and really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was great to chat with you. And I'm sure our paths will cross again.
Now that we've learned about an ecosystem from a person who's building it, I'm going to link back up with Nick to clarify on some jargon and take a deeper dive into this ecosystem.
Kaitlyn, how was your conversation with Melissa?
Oh, it was great. Also, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing wonderful. I was saying before we went on air, I don't have, I'm in athletic shorts, but I don't have like nice work pants. So I'm doing some laundry over in the background and, just getting started my day. But we're about to go in the weekend as of this recording. So overall, I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for asking, Kaitlyn.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, to answer your question about Melissa, I had a blast talking to her. She had so much great insight. We got a little off topic sometimes, but that's what I prefer. I really love kind of learning more about community. And, if we veer away from script, that's fine with me. So I had a blast with that.
What were some of your biggest takeaways?
Yeah. So we talked a lot about education. So one of the largest takeaways that we discussed was the best way to teach entrepreneurship is with those real life experiences. So prior, we'd had a lot of business classes, just stereotyping college and university. So you talk about business classes. That's great. Awesome. But what's really necessary is to talk about the entrepreneurship aspect of it, because there is a difference. And so we just touched on how she's assisting the educational community through the Eureka Program, through interacting with students. That was just something that I love to hear about, and anything helping students since I graduated not too long ago.
Yes, absolutely. That is, but always the whole passing down the next knowledge to next generation, and that is always something. Education is an important part of our society. Was there anything you had to look up?
Yeah, actually. Okay, so she had a poster in the background, and if it was a little hard to see, no worries, everyone. You can just go to the website and look up the I-10 map. But essentially, so there were all these little diagrams and all of these lines that intersected. So it was going to be your small business, venture capital, and it was just, again, those overlappings. So I thought it was a great representation, a visual one of ecosystem building. So for example, people who are visual learners, that's going to be a great step just to look at it, observe it, and just put that in your brain.
Yeah. And what was the name of the map again?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know it's on their website, I-10. And
I-10. Okay. Head on over to the I-10 website and definitely check it out. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on, Kaitlyn?
Yeah, just that I would suppose learning real life interactions, paying attention to students and teachers, and supporting your community that way. And I did say this in the episode, but but I wanted to say it again. A huge shout out and a huge thank you for our education providers, teachers, professors, staff, board members. Thank you so much. COVID has been ridiculous. I have family members who are teachers, and they've had to provide 3 curriculums: in person, completely online, and hybrid. 3 different curriculums. That's insane.
Yes. So my fiance, Emmy, who Kaitlyn knows and is friends with, she's a high school teacher and had to do the whole 3 curriculum BS. And it is so much to put on these educators. That huge props to a teacher at any level. Was there anything
no, that was kind of all I had. So if you want to go ahead and read us out, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ecosystem Builder podcast, which is a product of mug.news and hosted by myself, Nick Kastner, and Kaitlyn Clays. If you have any questions about today's episode, connect with us on Twitter at Nick Kastner, at Clays Creates, or at Mug News Official. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share with your friends. We release episodes every single Wednesday morning, so make sure to follow so you don't miss a beat.
See you next time.